Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collingwood for YouTube. Resident underslash of underslash Collingwood for Bit. Shoot, I'm here to continue my read along reviews for John Philip Betancourt's continuing blog series, The Return of Dark Shadows. Series 12, Chapter 8, God Has Forsaken Me. The chaos at the great house began to boil over. On this night, 2 women were missing, and only the remains of blood and a ransacked room at the Collinsport Inn left with many unanswered questions. Vicky's vanishing to the whole family was a true mystery, no one knowing she was locked away at Wincliffe Sanitarium. For his part, Barnabas knew the answers to what happened to Arabella, but his lips were sealed. Victoria's vanishing was about to become yet another hurdle for Barnabas to leap over. Time was of the essence. For everything to work in Barnabas's favor, Vicky's whereabouts needed to be solved with the least amount of exposure of the truth as possible. He needed to find India, who was still inside of Vicky's body, to finally reverse the effects of his family's cursed future and end their torment once and for all. But with her location unknown, Barnabas was left to do major damage control in order to keep to his plan and get himself out of this new mess of his own making. Well, mess is, yes. In the main drawing room, Elizabeth could not get the missing governess off her mind. Liz had not seen her secret daughter in almost 24 hours, and no one knew where she could have gone. Roger, seeing Carolyn and Barnabas rush off of Collingwood earlier and still feeling the effects of the alcohol in his system, stumbled downstairs and saw Elizabeth's worried face. "Oh, Liz, she'll turn up. They always turn up," Roger said, dropping files on the desk in the room. "One way or the other," he added with his eyes, signaling an oncoming hangover. What the... What's that supposed to mean?" Elizabeth growled. "My God, Liz, really. Well, either find Vicky alive well, and we'll just move on, or, well, the alternative is that we'll have to bury another governess. You know how it goes around these parts," Roger coldly replied. Elizabeth glared at her hungover brother with an icy stare. The very notion of Vicky's disappearance leading to her death sent shivers up Liz's spine. "Don't go there. Don't you dare go there," Liz scolded as she twisted in strand of her pearls. All right, I'm sorry. I'm sure she'll be fine," Roger acquiesced. "I don't understand where she could have gone. Why wouldn't she tell us? If she didn't want to work with the family anymore." "It just doesn't make sense," Elizabeth commented, not knowing Vicky was trapped at Wincliffe with India inside her body. "You worry too much. You always have," Roger replied, slurring his words. "Roger, you've had too much to drink. Just go upstairs. Go to bed," Elizabeth said, waving her brother away. "Stop. You stop that. You come down here to confront you on your horrible loss of an employee, or whatever she was, and that's how you react?" Roger said, his boozy attitude starting to show face. "Roger, go upstairs. I'll have someone bring you some coffee to sober you up," his older sister ordered. "I don't want any damn coffee." Fine, then go upstairs and go to sleep, Elizabeth screamed back, both of their frustrations starting to come to a boil. I really don't understand why you have to behave this way so often. Now is not the time for you to just roll over and drink yourself into a stupor, she added. Oh, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. Drinking myself into a stupor, Roger slurred. You know you're so consumed by Vicky. What you should be worried about is why your daughter is running out of this house at all hours of the night with Barnabas Collins, who may or may not really be related to us. That is what you should be worried about, Roger said, confessing to have seen Barnabas and Carolyn seemingly leave the mansion earlier that evening. What do you mean? When did Carolyn leave late at night? Elizabeth wondered. He means he saw Carolyn and myself go in search of Miss Winters, Barnabas said, entering the room and covering for the fact that he had controlled Carolyn's mind to go and remove Arabella's body and bury it before the police found it. Barnabas, I didn't hear the door, Elizabeth said, embarrassed that she and Roger were caught talking about him behind his back. I hope you don't mind I let myself in. In times like these, who can think of answering doors, Barnabas said, charming the Collins matriarch and not revealing his transported through the walls. Yes, of course, she said, smiling as Roger rolled his eyes. You and Carolyn went in search of Vicky. Did you find anything? Elizabeth asked. Unfortunately, we did not, and I assume she hasn't made contact here at home, Barnabas asked, genuinely concerned with Vicky's missing body and India, who was inside. Elizabeth frowned. Her heart sank, unsure of what to do next. It's been hours, Barnabas, and no one has seen a thing. It's just very frightening that Vicky would just leave like this. Not saying a word, I called the police department yesterday, and they said to wait one more day that perhaps Vicky would turn up, Elizabeth said. You called the police? Barnabas said, shocked to know this detail. Well, of course, Liz replied. Liz likes to worry, Barnabas. Worry all the time. She worries. If she's not worrying, she's always been a worrier, Roger said, still slurring his words. Sorry. Roger, go back to bed. Go to bed, Elizabeth demanded again, her jaw tightly wound with disdain for her brother's drunken attitudes. Roger lifted both of his hands in air, a sign of surrender, and frustrated with Elizabeth's managing of his life, and sighed. He pointed to the stack of Collins Fishing Fleet paperwork on the desk and said, Sign it. Then made his way through into the foyer, but not before yelling back into the drawing room with a wicked grin. Don't worry, sis. Everything's gonna be just horrible. As Elizabeth apologized for her brother's behavior, a sudden knock came on the great oak doors. Elizabeth's heart jumped, thinking it was Vicky. She rushed over and opened the doors, revealing Sheriff George Patterson and Detective Bureau Culvert. Sheriff, Elizabeth said, her heart now right back in place, but beating with fear in her ears. What's happened? Have you found Vicky? Sheriff kept his mouth shut on Vicky's whereabouts, fearing that the coat found at a murder scene would also connect his son Justin, a known friend of Vicky's, could potentially be linked to a possible murder. We haven't heard anything from Vicky, not yet anyway. Miss Stoddard, we did find this, George said, motioning for Bureau to show the coat he found in Arabella's hotel room. It's Victoria's, Elizabeth said, recognizing the coat right away. Elizabeth let in the two officers, and they walked into the drawing room, where she introduced them to Barnabas. Barnabas was suddenly stuck between a rock and a hard place, unsure of what the two men knew and why they had Vicky's coat. "I assume by your reaction to this coat Vicky has not made it home," Bureau said. "No," Elizabeth answered. "We're assuming she and Arabella Stoddard were together sometime last night, and this coat that you've identified as Vicky's was found on the floor of the hotel room. The question is, why were they together, and what happened, Miss Stoddard?" "Miss Collins, there was a lot of blood in the room," Bureau continued. "Blood?" Elizabeth gasped as Barnabas lifted an eyebrow. Barnabas was confused. He had not seen Vicky when he went to the inn to kill Arabella. Now he had more questions. Did India in Vicky's body see Arabella before he sent Carolyn to move the body? His mind was racing and frantic. He needed to procure and harness the innocence and light inside of India and secure the future of the family. But Carolyn's planting of the coat, a fact Barnabas still did not know, was another hurdle he had to overcome. A great amount of blood, and because there wasn't a body in the room, we don't know who it belongs to, and no one at the hotel seems to know either. They saw nothing, no one. "Would there be any reason for Miss Winters to see Miss Stoddard at her hotel room so late?" George asked. Elizabeth was frozen in speech. She could only imagine the worst, that Vicky somehow discovered that Arabella knew she was Elizabeth's illegitimate daughter and went to confront her. That, of course, was not the case. Vicky was at Wyncliffe, and the true culprit was standing right next to Elizabeth the whole time, his breath still hot with Arabella's blood. "How can that be, Sheriff? How can no one have seen anyone go in or out of the hotel room?" Barnabas asked, pretending he had no idea what was happening, even though he was the cause of it all. "That's what we'd like to know," Brewer added. "I was supposed to meet with Arabella to discuss some business, and when I arrived the hotel room was a mess, with this coat on the floor in a puddle of blood. It just seems very suspicious that Arabella would have left without meeting with me." "We had important things to discuss," Bureau said, making the case that Arabella may have been murdered. "Well, she's left town," Carolyn said, entering the room, still under Barnabas's mind control. They all turned shocked at Carolyn's statement. "Who left town?" "Who's left town?" George asked, unsure of which woman Carolyn was referring to. "Aunt Bella. I met with her late last night after I went looking for Vicky. I stopped by the hotel and she was going to leave. She had enough of Collinsport," Carolyn said, lying and covering for the murder. "Carolyn, that doesn't make sense. She and I were working on things," Bureau said. "Just exactly what were you working on? I didn't catch your name," Elizabeth asked Bureau. "Detective Bureau Calvert, Miss Stoddard. I was hired by your sister-in-law to make sure she was safe when she was here in Collinsport, sir," Bureau said, hiding the fact he was hired to look into Elizabeth's history and neglecting to add he knew about Vicky being her daughter. "Odd," Barnabas whispered to Elizabeth. "All right, I've had enough. None of this is making any sense. None of this. Why would Arabella just up and leave? Why would Vicky go to that hotel room and vanish just as mysteriously? We can assume at some point Vicky was there, and at some point one of them left in a bloody mess. But which one?" Elizabeth wondered aloud. Barnabas then had an idea. Carolyn had to be the person to throw the police off of Arabella's Arabella's tracks. He put his hand in his coat pocket and made a fist, squeezing it tightly, forcing all his telepathic energy into Carolyn's mind. Aunt Bella said Carolyn was beginning to feel her mind filling with the power from Barnabas, as he forced her to say something that was not true, forcing her lips and tongue to come up with a cover. She said she did something terrible and that she had to leave. I saw her in the lobby as she left, Carolyn said, lying. Something terrible? You don't think this is Vicky's blood, do you? George wondered. No, Elizabeth gasped. Barnabas was shocked. He did not expect Carolyn to say that. He did not expect her to cover for Arabella's disappearance by implicating her in the murder of Victoria Winters. But he still did not know where Vicky was. Perhaps it was true. Perhaps Vicky was dead too. He knew Carolyn was out for Vicky's blood. Could Carolyn have done something to her own half-sister? The thought made Barnabas's heart sink. In his attempts to correct the past, even more horrors were occurring. Still, no one knew Vicky was at Wincliffe this whole time except for George Patterson, still holding that secret close to his vest to keep his son out of trouble. I think we shouldn't jump to conclusions, Barnabas answered, as everyone turned to him for a better idea. Listen, everyone. It's all speculation at this point. A bloody coat doesn't mean much until we see a body. And at this point, we don't have much less to. If Vicky or Arabella contact you, Miss Stoddard, please tell me right away. In the meantime, we'll get back to the station and see if any of my officers have any new leads. We'll also try and track down Bella. It's possible she hasn't left the city yet, George added, attempting to calm the nervous energy in the drawing room. No, she's gone. She got a cruise ship earlier today and left for Europe, Carolyn said, lying. Bear could sense something about the way Carolyn was speaking was off. This wasn't how she normally spoke. The woman that he was secretly seeing, the woman he was secretly dating, had never been this monotone, never been this distant and vague with how she worded her speech. It was like watching someone reading off a script. That was a vacancy in her eyes. He didn't recognize all side effects from Barnabas's mind control. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Are you okay? He whispered as the others chatted about possible leads at the station. Carolyn suddenly snapped out of Barnabas's spell and mind control, her eyes fixed on the man she was falling in love with, their connection unlocking what Barnabas had done to her for a split second. She smiled and touched his hand without anyone seeing. I think so, she said, feeling strange but safe now that she was looking in Bureau's eyes. He smiled back, but wasn't happy with her answer. Bureau could tell something wasn't right. Again, Miss Stoddard, as soon as we hear more, we'll let you know, George said, ushering Bureau out of the room. Thank you, Sheriff, Elizabeth said. Now that the Collins were alone, they could speak freely, and Elizabeth was furious. Carolyn, tell me the truth. Where is Arabella? She ordered. Carolyn, seeing that Barnabas's control had momentarily lifted because of her connection to Bureau, knew Barnabas had controlled her to say it. She could feel him staring at her directly, his eyes piercing her soul. She was scared of him. She was terrified of what he could do to her, to all of them, if she told the truth. Carolyn took a gulp of air and continued to spread lies. Her life and all those that she loved was at stake. I told you, Mother, Carolyn began softly as Barnabas looked on, waiting for the moment that Carolyn would expose him and everything would be destroyed. I saw Aunt Bella in the hotel lobby, and she was leaving town. I don't know where exactly in Europe, but she's gone. She's gone for good. Barnabas took a breath of relief that his murderous secret was safe for now. Elizabeth was plagued with worry and asked them to leave her alone to work on the fishing fleet paperwork so she could focus at one thing at the time. Barnabas and Carolyn complied and closed the drawing room doors behind them, leaving Elizabeth alone. Now in the foyer, Barnabas confronted his cousin Carolyn about the coat in the room. "What have you done?" "How did Vicky's coat get in Arabella's room?" Barnabas growled. "I left it there. It was an accident," Carolyn said, lying. "That was a mistake, Caroline, a mistake that may cost me dearly," the vampire said, worrying about what was happening. He was unsure how to fix this giant error in Carolyn's behavior, but Carolyn was now free to confront her mysterious cousin too, and she was not going to hold back. "You listen to me. I don't know what you've done to me. I don't know why or what you are, but I can tell that something inside of you isn't right. There is blood on your hands, literally, and now you've involved me. Arabella, you killed her," Carolyn began, as her voice began to crack, remembering her aunt's bloody body. "Carolyn, please, I can explain everything, but it won't make any sense right now if I did," Barnabas said. "No, no, you're cold. I should tell everyone the truth. I should just come out and tell everyone right now that what you did to Arabella and how you're making me lie," Carolyn shouted as Barnabas quickly covered her mouth. "Carolyn, if you do that, everything will be destroyed. I had to make sure Arabella was out of the picture. Please, you must understand me. This is for the good of the family. All of you, now here and in the future," he said as a muffled Carolyn quickly ripped Barnabas's hands from her mouth. "God forgive you, Barnabas Collins. God forgive you," Carolyn said as she rushed up the stairs, unsure of what her next move would be. Barnabas began to feel the weight of guilt on his shoulders and his heart. He knew what he did was the monstrous act, but it had to be done to save his family. It had to be done. Arabella's place in Collinsport threatened their future, the family, was Barnabas's only concern. He turned around and stared at his own painting on the wall. It was as if he were looking into a mirror. His face, the same face painted centuries ago, was looking down at him with disdain and embarrassment. Shame. A tear fell from his eye, and it was almost looked as if the same tear came down from the painting's eye. "God has long forsaken me, Carolyn," Barnabas said to himself. "I am on my own." Outside the mansion, getting into their respective cars under the shadow of the main turret, Private Detective Bureau Clover wondered to George Patterson about what was really going on. The whole situation was confusing to them both. "As soon as I can get you something, I will," Bureau said to George, who hastily shot him down. "Detective, I think it's better if you leave this up to my department. I really do. You're no formal detective at our precinct. However, your help this far has been appreciated, but I think this is where your part of the story ends," George said, trying to contain the investigation to himself and himself alone, thereby protecting Justin from any connection to a murder. "But she's my client," Vera replied, "who's gone to Europe. If you need her to pay you for your services, that's something you'll have to take up with a court. But as far as I'm concerned, Arabella is a suspect in the disappearance of Victoria Winters. And having her paid PI dabbing in an investigation where she's the main suspect just doesn't sit right with me. George continued, still hiding the fact that he knew where Vicky was the whole time. Buer felt defeated. George had all the power, all control, and the investigation was indeed his. All Buer could do now was allow the hefty sheriff to get in his squad car and drive off. George's order for Buer abandoning his involvement and discontinue his part in the search was beating at his brain. Buer knew something was wrong with Carolyn. He could tell she was hiding something, but it wasn't clear why, or why she didn't come clean to him right in the drawing room. And George himself was hiding something too. Know the truth. He knew the truth. He knew exactly where Vicky was, Wincliffe Sanitarium, and he felt her better off there, gone and forgotten, than in his son's life. The next morning, Buer arrived at a small cottage in the south part of the town near the docks at the Blue Whale. It was a small, green-colored building with only 4 small windows, front windows that reflected in the overcast sky above town. Buer slowly pushed open the iron gates and walked slowly into tiny front courtyard that was so lush with green shrubs that it looked more like a small mock jungle than a Collinsport garden. He was there to see his younger sister, Noelle. Noelle Culvert was a gifted woman. She was open to the other world, the world from beyond, the veil of the living and the dead. This gift she inherited at birth and was passed down by her mother's mother and her mother's mother before her. It was part of the Culvert family, and a family of Krull lineage that was deep rooted in the world of magic and COPD that reached as far back as the freed slaves from New Orleans. Only one woman in the family at the time could occupy the gift of the third eye. In this generation, it was Noelle. With this gift, Noelle could knowledge of the future, but she knew things in vague terms because of her preference not to use her gift. She was constantly pushing back, hating the fact that she used her ability to its full potential. She could know all, see all, be all. She was a reluctant psychic of much power, but her brother Buer needed her help to tap into those gifts. Now more than ever, he walked into her cozy, comfortable, decorated home without knocking, a very sibling thing of him to do. He looked around and fed her 3 goldfish that swam up to greet him as he sprinkled in their flaky food. He tapped on a glass in their bowl, his regular way of saying hello. "You're going to kill them one day. I already fed them this morning," Noelle said, coming from her kitchen in the other room. They greeted each other with a very French-style double kiss on the cheek. "Listen, I have to cut right to the chase," Buer began, his sister quickly rolling her eyes, knowing what he was there for, but not due to her psychic abilities. He always started his sentence that way when he needed her to use her powers. "I've already told you I don't push what I don't want," she said, referencing her abilities. "But this time it's important. It really is," Buer said, begging like a little boy to his younger sister. "You always say that," she said in a hushed tone, scoping the scooping the extra food out of the fishbowl. "It's about Carolyn," he shot back as she quickly turned around at the sound of that name. "Carolyn?" said and Noel were old friends since they were children. Noel and Carolyn were just months apart in age and had grown up together. But as they grew older, and Noel began to see things about Carolyn's connection to the dark forces, through no fault of her own, Noel decided that the friendship needed to end. This was almost a decade ago when they graduated from high school. "What about her?" Noel asked, not knowing her own brother was secretly dating Carolyn. "I don't really know how to tell you this without upsetting you, but Carolyn Stoddard and I have been seeing each other for a few months. Now things are getting serious and I really am falling for her. But today something told me there was something wrong. Something wasn't right." "Noel, there is this case I was working on, and it's gotten very strange. The woman I was hired to work for has suddenly vanished. She's just gone, no trace of her. And Carolyn is hiding something about her. I can feel it. But I just can't pinpoint what it is," Bureau explained, waiting for his sister to tear into him for keeping his relationship a secret. "That's a lot to take in, but you know that I've always had my reservations about Carolyn and her family. Why would you keep this from me?" she wondered. "Honestly, I thought you'd just know," he joked, hinting at her ability of knowing all. "That's not funny," she shot back. "I can't tell you who you can fall in love with or who you can't, but there is and always will be something about Carolyn and her family that I just cannot trust. I refuse to be some sort of police psychic for you. I wish I could be, instead of hoping I would just get this done for you and tell you what you need to know. Why don't you listen to your gut? Your gut is telling you something is not right. It's not. Listen to it. Please take heed of what the universe is telling you. Drop her today," Noel insisted. "It's not that easy. I'm falling," Bureau began before she stopped him. "Nope. Please don't say it. I don't want to hear any of it," his sister replied, hurt by the notion he was falling in love with a woman she felt she could not trust. "I'm seeing her tonight, Noel. I really wish I knew more about what was happening with her. Can you help me? Can You can make this happen. Please think about it, won't you?" Noelle turned back around after refusing to look at her brother, and she looked deep into his eyes and allowed her emotions and walls to drop and let the rush of energy from her powers fill her body. He kissed her on the cheek and left her to decide on whether or not she would use her abilities to help him find out what was really happening with Carolyn and the rest of the Collins family, and if they knew where Arabella and Vicky really were. Noelle, now alone in her cottage, contemplated her brother's request. Would she finally allow herself to tap into the things, the powers, the third eye she had inherited from her Crow ancestors? For Noelle, this was a no-brainer. She knew she had to if her brother's own safety was at risk. She had to see what she could do to protect him, even divulge into a world she feared, a world of shadows and darkness. She quickly pulled the front curtains of her living room, cloaking the room in dim light. It was dark now, and she sat with a single candle burning in her coffee table, allowing the tiny flame to flicker just inches from her hazel eyes, that she slowly closed to allow her powers to take over. She took a deep breath and held it, allowing all the energy to pull out of her body and into the void of the supernatural. Her dark gray cat, sitting in the corner of her green couch, hissed in the dark, sensing the world of the shadows creeping in. The television flickered on by itself and fizzed white noise over the cat's hiss. She could feel flashes of light energy coming from her own spine, spinning around. The energy was different colors, different shades, different hues of light. And then, like the moment you wake before a dream, Noelle found herself in a black room all alone. A single spotlight snapped on just in front of her, then another, like a path of stones forming a path for Noelle to follow. And she did. As she got to the final spot of the light, the path, she saw her great-grandmother sitting in a chair in a black room all alone. Nana? Nana? How did I get here? Noelle asked her, but the old woman pointed to a black wall that opened up, leading to the young Noelle in. What is this? Noelle asked her. The old woman did not respond. All she did was snap her fingers, and Noelle was instantly transported into the hotel room, where she saw the figure of a beautiful woman with red hair. The redhead was standing in front of a figure, a man, another, in the shadows. Suddenly the woman screamed, and a shadow lunged at her, then vanishing into black smoke, leaving the woman laying on the hotel room floor. Noelle was shaken. She stood in the hotel room and slowly walked over to the woman on the floor, bleeding from the neck. Her eyes were open. Death was on her face. Blood poured from her wounds and pulled in a crimson circle around her head. Then a wind filled the room, and Noelle noticed all the clocks spinning forward 5 hours ahead. And just as the night sky turned a dark purple, another woman entered the hotel room. In walked Carolyn and screamed at the sight of the dead woman. Carolyn rushed to the door, but then came back, leaving a coat, Victoria's coat, in a puddle of blood. Noelle was confused. What was Carolyn doing in this room? Who was the woman? Noelle slowly walked over to the body and the floor, and Noelle looked into the face of Arabella Starr. As Noelle looked closer in her dead eyes, she saw the reflection of a man so cold, so lost, that it shook Noelle to her core. Arabella's eyes reflected the face of the man who murdered her, the man of shadows, Barnabas. Noelle screamed at the sight of all the blood and of the man's face, and woke herself up on her own sofa in her own living room. She knew now Arabella was dead, and that Carolyn knew she was dead all along, and that Vicky has nothing to do with it. Bureau had to know. Justin woke up on the side of the road, still in his car, that was hiding in a deep embankment under a grove of trees just around the corner from Sain Street in Bangor. He had driven all night back to Wincliffe to save India. He had to find her. He had to get her out of that hospital. Finding Julia was his idea, and Julia did not make things any better. In fact, she made them worse. Justin slowly made his way back into the hospital through a service entrance that a kitchen aide had left open, and like a hungry lab mouse searching the maze for a bit of cheese, Justin furiously searched the halls for India's room. He needed to find her. He needed to get to her. He needed to get her out. He kept going, stealthily, hiding in the shadows. Once a doctor or nurse passed him in the hall, quickly darting into a closed-off room. swiftly bouncing behind large potted plants and support beams, all under cover so that no one knew he was back in the building. As he frantically searched the room after room, he finally came to the room number 1256. There was India in Victoria's body, sleeping with cuts from the glass off of the window she fell out of in her fight with Julia the night before. He slowly pushed the door open, and as he creaked, India opened her eyes. She gasped, and he put his finger to his mouth, motioning for her not to make a sound. He whispered, "We have to get you out of here, India." India nodded her head. He helped her out of bed, and she rushed over to a closer that had her street clothes hanging. "I thought you'd never come back. I didn't know what was going to happen to me," India said in Vicky's voice as Justin cracked the room door to check if the coast was clear. "I couldn't just leave you here," he said. No one believes me. No one believes anything I've said. And Julia, she thinks I'm crazy. She thinks I'm making all this up," India exclaimed. "I know, my dad, it's a long story, but he doesn't believe me either. We have to find Barnabas. He has to take you back. This has got to end," Justin said, his frustrations now showing. India looked at Justin. She couldn't believe how kind he was and how brave he was to come back. It was risky, all of it, but he did it for her. "Okay, come on," Justin said. India slowly put on shoes and a pair of dark green slacks and tucked in the flowing oversized hospital shirt in them. She then tied Vicky's thick, luxurious dark hair up and put out of her face. Justin grabbed India's hand, and slowly two slipped through the halls of Wincliffe on their way to the back exit through the kitchen. As the two slowly passed through the halls, Julia Hoffman was in her office, exquisitely cut and bruised from her fall with India. She was alive and well. Not even a fall from the fourth-story window could take Julia Hoffman out. She had so much more to do. As the stoic and cut-up Julia sat in her glossy red leather chair, she turned it slowly. She was not alone. As her chair went on its circular trip, it stopped to face her visitor, George Patterson. "So Justin hasn't been here to see Vicky?" Patterson wondered. "No, I was with Miss Winters all night." Julia paused, and then indistant, Julia said, being vague about her physical altercation with India. "It's important that you tell me if he comes here." He rushed out of the house, and the first place he'd come back to was here. "Not to mention the Collins family will be wondering why you haven't let them know you have their governess," Patterson said. "You didn't tell them either?" Julia said in a snarky tone as George rolled his eyes at her. "I didn't tell them. Something has come up, and having Justin linked to this deranged young woman could put Justin on the brink of something," George said as Julia interrupted. "Like his mother?" she asked, pointing out Justin's mother's issues with mental illness. "I owe you for helping Rebecca. You don't need to remind me," George revealed. "Yes, you do," Julia shot back. "Listen, Sheriff, I know what you want me to do. I can't just pretend your son doesn't also have issues going on inside his mind, too. I'm almost sure these issues are residual effects from what happened to his mother. I would really hope you consider bringing him back here yourself so I can monitor not only Vicky, but Justin, too," Julia explained. "Doctor, I can handle my son. I can take care of him like I've always done." for years now. What I need from you is to keep Vicky Winters here. Under no circumstances can she and my son be seen together, Sheriff Patterson said, trying to cover up his son possibly being involved in the murder of Arabella with Vicky. Suddenly, Julia saw India and Justin pass her office window. Damn! Look! Julia screeched, pointing to India as Vicky and Justin sneaking out past his office windows. George and Julia got up quickly and rushed to the door. Justin and India were gone. Julia and George quickly jogged down the hall after them and found them in the hall hugging. They were just 2 steps from the kitchen exit. We're going to get you back, India, back to 2019. Barnabas will help, Justin said. India looked at Justin, her eyes watering. He had risked so much to come back for her. She lifted herself up on her tippy toes and kissed him. Thank you, she said with tears in her eyes. They hugged again, then escaped through the back door, never noticing they were being watched. George started after him. No, Julia shouted with her arm bolted across George's chest, stopping him in place. Why? We can't let them go. That woman has done something to my son. He keeps calling her India. They're not well, Doctor. I'm afraid they're involved in the murder of someone. We need to stop them, George shouted. Yes, I know, Julia said, her voice calm and collect. A stark contrast to George's frantic state. Let's let them get to wherever their car is, and then we'll follow, she added. Follow? I want to know where they're going. I want to know who they think this Barnabas person is, Julia said. Barnabas Collins? He's the man staying at the old house at Collinwood. I met him last night, Patterson confirmed, shocking Julia. He's real? Julia asked. Very much so, Patterson said again. Very well, then, let's see this Barnabas what this Barnabas person has over them. I need to meet Barnabas, and I need to know exactly what he's doing to both Justin and Victoria, Julia said. Julia and George waited. She looked at her watch and then smirked as a minute passed since Justin and India vanished in his car. Let's go, she said in a deep and cold voice. The 2, doctor and town sheriff, then left the hospital hot in the trail of India and Justin, and soon would come face to face with a force not even Dr. Julia Hoffman could have ever imagined in her whole life. She would encounter. She would soon face a man that would change her life forever, not a figment of India and Justin's imagination, a real man with deep, dark secrets and lust. Barnabas Collins. Alright, guys, that's the read along. This was very, very, very terrifying and scary chapter. There's a lot of good tension terror here. You have Arabella's, death now being, being questioned as a death. Her missing body being questioned as a death, I should say. You have Carolyn, who's under Barnabas's mind control, but she breaks free of it because of her love for Bureau. And now he's suspicious. You have Bureau, who's suspicious of Carolyn lying. He doesn't get why she's lying. I don't know if Bureau is curious about Barnabas, but he's damn sure curious of why Carolyn's acting strange. I really love the interaction between Elizabeth and Roger and just the characters in the story. You also had a really good moment for Justin, sort of like it was his idea to go to Julia. He feels like he fucked up, so he's trying to, damn, I owe that girl. I gotta get her the hell out of there. That's my doing too. So he feels responsible for her being there, and which is understandable. Again, great scene setting. The characters are always very, very, very well written. I love Noelle. I love how she was very hesitant. She didn't want to do it, and then, you know what? I gotta protect my little brother. Yeah. That's all siblings. Sort of. Sometimes. But I do think, you have a lot of terror. You have Noelle, who's terrified of what she saw. You have George Patterson, who's terrified that his son is losing his sanity and or has lost his sanity. You have Elizabeth, who's not only now terrified that Victoria is missing, she's terrified that Victoria may be dead, and it's because of the lie Carolyn has told. Carolyn is terrified of Barnabas Collins. She doesn't know what the hell he is or what he is. So again, you have a lot of terror in this chapter and a lot of good tension terror. Really, really good. Link will be in the description box for this. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.